Let's speak to one of those attending, the Liberal Democrat leader, Tim Farron, who's at the march. Mr Farron, thank you very much for being with us. Unite for Europe, this march taking place today. Given that Article 50 is going to be triggered, given that we are going to be leaving the European Union at some point, what is the point?
What's the point? First of all, we've got thousands of people here today in a very, very joyful sort of mood, wanting to express their identity, our identity, as being fully British and fully European. And yes, Article 50 will be triggered this week, but none of us know what the deal will be at the end. Theresa May doesn't know, so how can the rest of us be expected to have any idea what it is we are emerging into? The British people voted very narrowly for departure last June, but we believe, as Liberal Democrats and many others here too, that we should have the right to now vote on destination. We don't know what that is yet, and that means there should be a referendum at some time in the next 2 years that gives the people the final say on the deal we'll have to live with for the next, let's say, 50 years. And if they don't like that deal, they should have the right to remain in the EU.
But it's self-evidently the case that the country is divided. We don't need a protest march through the centre of London to illuminate us as to the fact that the referendum was, as you say, pretty much 50-50. So, again, what do you hope to achieve by having people turn out in their thousands with their placards, all particularly well-meaning, I'm sure, but what will come of this?
Well, you're right, it is probably the politest demonstration in the history of London demonstrations, so it's a great honour to be part of that. But it's also right to say that this isn't just about the message internally. It's a message to Theresa May that this is, it may be right for the UK government to pursue negotiations for Brexit, but it's this government that has chosen this Brexit. Nobody voted to leave the single market. That is not it's not enacting the will of the people, it's twisting and interpreting the will of the people. But it's not just persuading Theresa May that she is taking an extreme version of Brexit that was never on the ballot paper. It's also sending a message to plenty of other countries. I've just been interviewed by various journalists for other European and other international broadcast arms, and it's important that we send a message to them that the message that they hear from Theresa May's government, that Britain is cutting itself off from the rest of the world, is not actually how a vast chunk of the British people feel. I don't even think that most people who voted Leave wanted Britain to cut itself off from the single market, for example. So it's important in democracy that you lose with good grace, but that you don't give up. You keep fighting for what you believe in.
But Mr Farron, isn't this all just a little after the fact? I mean, you complain that the hard Brexit option wasn't on the ballot paper. Frankly, nothing was on the ballot paper apart from whether or not we should remain a member of the European Union. Wouldn't the time to have made these complaints have better been ahead of the vote itself?
Well, we did. I don't blame any person who voted Leave or Remain for the fact that destination was not on the ballot paper. If you want to blame somebody, I guess it's David Cameron and his administration that created that kind of very narrow option and left us in a situation where people voting to depart from the EU, but with no clue as to what we were landing up in. And the reality is, the choice to leave the single market is just that, it's a choice. It was never on the ballot paper, and us leaving the single market is us cutting ourselves off from the world's biggest market. It's a vote for, or a choice to lead Britain into austerity and irrelevance. And that was not what people who voted Leave voted for. It's a betrayal of them, as well as an insult to the whole of our country. And if you believe in democracy, you keep fighting for the British people to have their voice heard. And at the moment, the British government is interpreting, twisting the will of the people, not enacting it, choosing to take us out of the single market, even though that was never something the British people were asked for their view upon. And so it's right for us not to back out. I am disappointed by other opposition parties, shall we say, who've chosen to roll over and just let this happen. We take the view you've got to fight for what you believe in and fight for the British people to have the final say here. Otherwise, we will have had something that started with democracy last June, and it'll end up with a stitch-up sometime in the next 2 years, and that will be terrible for democracy.
Can't think what other opposition parties you might have been referring to there. I mean, you mentioned Theresa May a moment ago. She does have the mandate. She was a Remainer, certainly by no means as active a campaigner as others. But the message that she's giving at the moment is, look, we all need to come together and try to secure the best deal. What would you say to those who suggest that a march such as the one that's taking place today is serving to exacerbate the divide that exists between the two?
So I totally disagree with that analysis, though it's fair, of course, for you to put it. The reality is this: if you were the Prime Minister and you wanted to heal the wounds in Britain and you were trying to bring both sides together, then what you would choose is actually a consensual path to Brexit. So maybe leaving the European Union and remaining in the single market. What you wouldn't do is to choose a Brexit more extreme than the one Nigel Farage has spent the last 20 years asking for, given that he's argued all these last few years until recently that we should be in the single market. market and following the Norwegian model. So if you wanted to bring the country together, you wouldn't choose this extreme and austere version of Brexit she has chosen. Those of us here today campaigning, as I say, the most polite, best behaved demonstration in the history of demonstrations, are here saying that Britain can do better than this, that there is another view possible, and just playing to the gallery of our few hard right-wingers that now control her party is not bringing the country together. It is quite the opposite.
Mr Farron, you mentioned Nigel Farage a second ago. One imagines that he's quite a happy man today, given that his arch nemesis, Douglas Carswell, has chosen to leave UKIP. The Liberal Democrats are a famously rather broad church. Is there a place for Douglas Carswell within your party?
I don't imagine he'd want to be with us. I have to say, and I've been on the record of saying this in the past, I'm not just saying it now because you're asking me about him. I've always thought Douglas Carswell was far too human and small L liberal to be in UKIP. So I recognise, I think, what he's chosen to do today as being something which is very positive. He is genuinely independent-minded individual. He is very, very anti-Europe, but he is somebody I think you count as a libertarian, and UKIP very much an authoritarian party. He didn't feel very much at home there from my perspective. Whether Farage is happy about that, to see an infinite decrease in his parliamentary representation in Westminster and see UKIP quickly becoming an irrelevance, I think that might be something he should welcome less.
Well, as someone who knows very well just how difficult it can be when your parliamentary presence shrinks significantly, do you think that this is the end for UKIP?
Who knows? I mean, I think the problem is that UKIP don't really need a leader now, given that Theresa May has chosen to be it. What she's done is she's interpreted the narrow result for the referendum to be an endorsement of a whole world view, which seems to be about small government, isolationism, intolerance, things that, frankly, I don't think most of the 52% wanted, and certainly the 48% didn't. Very much anti-British in my view, but that is a kind of UKIP ideology. So UKIP seem to be pretty pointless now, given that the Tories have chosen to be them, and that would mean a lot of moderate, sensible Conservatives, responsible Conservatives who love their country, traditional values, and who believe in those values of tolerance and, you know, being pro-business and free trade that the Tory party has generally been in favour of in the past. They must feel the Tory party is no longer for them, and I'm here to say that there is another option available for them.
Tim Farron, we'll let you return to, as you described it, the politest march in London's history. Thank you very much for joining us in Sky News this lunchtime.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.